They paid her in real money for her virginity, the sort of money that could purchase anything a man ever desired in this wild stretch of frontier. But Sister Evangeline was not to be bought. She was the very thing that made her worth pursuit. The sun beat fiercely above the desolate desert path as Evangeline spurred her tired horse forward. Her alb, drenched in sweat and covered with dust, clung to her shuddering form. 3 riders followed at a slow pace behind her, their black silhouettes like specters of doom. She didn't have to glance over her shoulder. She could sense their gaze searing into her backbone like burning iron. They'd been tracking her since dawn. Her mind replayed the night before at the Sakuro mission. The chapel had been quiet until he showed up, Colt brazen. The scent of whiskey and tobacco clung to him like sin as he loomed in the candlelight. "Sister," he slurred, "I've got men offering $200 for just one night with an angel like you. That's more money than your little mission sees in a year. Think about it." She'd struck him so hard the report had seemed to come off the altar like a shot. But Brazen just grinned and licked the blood from his lip. "Nobody denies Colt Brazen, sister. Nobody." And now, as her horse lurched under her on the rough path, Evangeline understood that her disobedience could cost her everything. There was nowhere left to go, only burned hills, knotted bushes, and the dusty shadows of men who would not rest. But then, over the rattling heat haze, she saw it. A faded sign pinned to a wonky post. Carver Ranch, 2 miles. And below it, in worn-out red letters, "Trespassers will be shot." Hope flared in her chest, short-lived, tenuous. What if this rancher was only another predator? What if he'd heard rumors about Brazen's reward and thought her an easy target? Salvation in this harsh landscape was as fleeting as a breath and often as false. Behind her, the riders closed in. Shots cracked the air. They were no longer warning shots. Colt Brazen had run out of patience. Evangeline stamped her heels against the horse's flanks a final time. This ranch was all she had left. She prayed, pleaded, that there was someone behind those walls who still held to decency. Someone who still feared God more than gold. And as she topped the last rise and gazed down at the ranch house, a single question tore at her soul. What if the door was already shut? Thaddeus Carver had been cleaning his rifle on the porch when he heard the shots. Being 15 miles from the closest town educated a man to know trouble by sound. Those weren't shots that hunted animals, they were messages. He laid down the rifle and looked out over the horizon, sun burning in his eyes. There, galloping down the hill, a solitary horseman, her white robes streaming behind her like a banner of surrender. Her horse was done, its gait unsteady, faltering with each step. And behind her, 3 men without haste. They understood the game was almost finished. Thaddeus hadn't sought out trouble. 5 years ago, he'd lost his wife, Martha, and their unborn baby, to cholera's fever. He'd established this ranch to leave the world behind, to forget, to be alone. But as the rider approached, he realized the truth. This wasn't some woman. The habit indicated that she was a nun, a woman of God, and she was fleeing for her life. The horse collapsed 50 yards from his porch, buckling into the dust. The woman leaped off the saddle, thumped to the ground, then ran for her feet. Blood poured from her temple as she ran toward him. "Please," she panted, her voice torn with dust and urgency. "They're going to kill me." Thaddeus locked eyes with her, scared, beseeching, defiant, and something within him roused, something he'd believed lay dead with Martha, his conscience. Then the riders arrived. Colt Brazen led, silver spurs glinting in the sunlight. He extended a hand, commanding his men to halt. His grin was wolfish, coated in pretended charm. "Sister Evangeline," he bellowed, "no need to flee. We merely wish to discuss business." The woman grasped Thaddeus's porch railing, shaking. "His name is Colt Brazen," she spoke softly. "He wants to sell me to his men. He says no one will stand in his way." Thaddeus glanced from her to the three riders, their guns at their sides. If he denied her entry, she was dead. But if he interfered, he was going to war. And yet, there was something in Brazen's condescending stance, his smirking smile. It wasn't merely about money. This was about power, about grabbing what he desired because no one stood in his way. Not now. Thaddeus descended from his porch. His boots met the ground with deliberation, one hand on the butt of his Colt .45. "This is private property," he said, cool and unwavering. "State your business or ride on." Brazen laughed. "Appears our little angel found her savior." He walked his horse nearer, eyes sparkling with ill intent. "Name's Colt Brazen. Perhaps you've heard of me." Thaddeus did not move. "Don't believe I have." But he had. Everyone in the territory here knew the name of Brazen, the type of outlaw who left ashes and widows behind. Brazen doffed his hat to Evangeline. "She's got something that belongs to me. A debt, let's say." "I owe him nothing," she breathed, trembling. "He tried to force himself on me." In the chapel, Thaddeus's jaw clenched in anger. "I think you heard the lady," he said, voice as steel. "She doesn't owe you a damn thing." Brazen's men restlessly shifted in their saddles, fingers itching close to their guns. The desert leaned in, suspended in breath. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Brazen said, all sugar and venom. "She ran off from Sakuro, cost me a good deal, $200, to be exact." He leaned forward in his saddle. "She slapped me, broke something valuable, my reputation." His smile twisted into something uglier. "But I'm a reasonable man. Let me take her and we'll call it square. Or things get messy." Thaddeus moved between Brazen and the girl. "Here's my proposition," he said, his voice low and hard. "You and your men ride on out now, and perhaps I forget I saw you attempting to purchase a woman like cattle." The quiet that followed was charged, and then the storm hit. Feeling the tightness in their leader's stance, Colt Brazen's men rolled their saddles slightly, looking to each other for the command they knew was imminent. Brazen smiled, soft and sinister. "You know," he said, voice like velvet laced with venom. "I was hoping you'd say that." He raised his hand. Instantly, his companions began to spread out, forming a half circle around the ranch house like wolves preparing for the kill. "I've had my eye on this place for a while," he continued. "Remote, defensible, a perfect little hideout for a man who doesn't like to be found." And just like that, Thaddeus Carver understood. This wasn't just about Sister Evangeline anymore. It never had been. Brazen had been circling this ranch for months, and today was his excuse to take it. Now they weren't just outnumbered. They were surrounded. Thaddeus felt the fear creep in. He may have just signed both of their death certificates. As Brazen's crew closed ranks, Thaddeus's thoughts moved quickly. The sensible thing would be to deliver Evangeline and hope they'd show mercy. But then Martha's voice echoed in his memory. His wife, long dead years ago, words she said on their wedding day. "A man who won't stand for what's right isn't worth marrying." He shifted a little, his tone low but firm. "Sister," he said, never looking away from Brazen, "run toward the barn if I order you to. There is a rifle mounted over the stalls. Can you shoot?" I've never," she faltered, her words dying. "Just take aim and pull the trigger. The good Lord will see the rest through." Brazen's voice was dripping with simulated politeness now. "You see, Carver, your small homestead is on the cleanest road from Sakuro to Les Cruces. A man could build an empire by holding this valley. Naturally, in order to do that—" He smiled, like a snake curling. The existing inhabitant would need to be evicted. It all fell into place. Evangeline was not why they had come. She was merely the spark Brazen used to ignite the flame. The true treasure was land, power, control. "Oh, but don't get me wrong," Brazen continued. "The sister's still worth something. A woman like that, she'll sell for a good price down Mexico way." Evangeline gasped behind him. Thaddeus sensed something stir within him, dark, volcanic rage. This is the sort of evil he had believed was left behind when he came home from the war. The sort that regarded everything, women, earth, lives, as commodities. "Now I want to ask you something. If you were Thaddeus Carver, what would you do? Would you fight back and take on 3 gun-wielding men for a woman you just met, knowing you'd most likely be killed? Or would you stand aside and have her taken, to save your own hide and retain what's yours? Let me know in the comments, because what Thaddeus did next would determine whether either of them would live to see the sun set." "Run," Thaddeus told her, and he drew. The gun blazed like lightning. His first shot hit Brazen. Glass broke behind him. Brazen's men had started firing through his windows in hopes of driving him out. Out of the corner of his eye, Thaddeus saw Brazen slithering through the dirt towards his pistol, blood oozing from a cut above his head. Anger blazed in his eyes like fire. Thaddeus checked his pistol, 2 shots remaining. 3 men. And somewhere Evangeline was crying out. He couldn't determine if she was hurt. Then, crack! A rifle was fired, but not at him. Thaddeus glanced up in time to see the 3rd outlaw flinch, blood spreading on his chest before he fell from his horse like a rag doll. The voice came from the barn, shaking. "I got him. Dear God, I actually got him." Evangeline. She discharged the rifle. Thaddeus's heart swelled with pride. The sister had discovered her mettle, but it wasn't done. Brazen's bloody hands wrapped around his pistol. He pushed to one knee, aimed towards the barn, face contorted in anger. "You killed my boys," he bellowed. "I'm gonna make you both pay." Thaddeus emerged from behind the trough and shot again. The bullet hit Brazen in the shoulder, spinning him around but not halting him. He remained standing, still weaponed, still lethal. "Sister, get down," Thaddeus bellowed. Too late. Brazen blazed away, bullets shredding the barn door. Evangeline screamed within. He hadn't a clue if it was terror or agony. A single bullet left, and the battered outlaw, his initial target, was rising, bloodied but breathing. He searched for a secondary gun, quaking but resolute. 2 foes, 1 bullet. Thaddeus didn't hesitate. He sprinted directly at Brazen, drew his Colt, and fired point blank. The bullet struck dead center, sending the outlaw to his knees. But the last man hadn't finished aiming. Another shot sounded. Thaddeus prepared for agony. It never arrived. Instead, the scarred man fell, clean shot through the forehead. Behind him, Evangeline stood in the barn doorway, shaking, the rifle still smoking. "Is it over?" she whispered. Thaddeus turned, looking back over the yard. 3 corpses, blood on the ground, windows broken. Peace had left this land the moment Brazen arrived. He approached where the outlaw was gasping for life. Brazen's anger still smoldered, even as death gained. "You think this is over?" he panted. "My employer, Valdez, he don't forget debts." The name hit Thaddeus like a sledgehammer. Joaquin Valdez, a name spoken in terror throughout the land. A man who would always collect what was due to him. If Brazen worked for him, the very worst was not even over yet. At the barn, Evangeline let go of the rifle and knelt on the ground, trembling, her hands looking back at her like unfamiliar objects. I killed them," she muttered. "I took human lives." Thaddeus approached her, pushing through shattered glass, thumbing his empty revolver into its holster. "You defended yourself," he murmured. "You defended me. There's no sin in that. But I'm a woman of God. I made vows to save lives, not take them. How do I ever stand before him again? He knelt beside her, saw the anguish in her eyes, and something else struggling behind it. My Martha used to say, sometimes God asks us to choose between two kinds of righteousness. You could have remained faithful to your vow and let us both perish. But instead, you resisted evil. That counts. Evangeline regarded him, hope little more than a spark but increasing. Do you think so, really? I think Martha's looking out for us both, and I think she's proud of you. For one brief instant, peace came back, wholly quiet, shrouded in survival. Then, hoofbeats, dozens, moving swiftly, riding north. Thaddeus snatched up his spyglass and searched the swirling dust. A dozen men, perhaps more. And in the lead rode a man in a silver-braided coat. Valdez. Up, Thaddeus said, his voice taut with need. We must go. Now. They would follow them over open land. Thaddeus was certain of it. 2 miles up the canyon, he instructed, cinching the saddle. There's an abandoned mine shaft. If we can make it there, we might have a chance. Valdez's men were closing in rapidly, but Thaddeus had a strategy. He won't ride into a location where we can take them out one at a time. Evangeline procrastinated. But what of your home? Thaddeus stopped, his gaze sweeping over the barn he'd worked his life to build, the porch where he'd sat remembering Martha's laughter. Some things are more important than property, he said softly. Martha taught me that, too. They rode his best horse, Thunder, and rode hard for the canyon. Galloping past the bodies, something glinting near Brazen's body caught Evangeline's attention. She slid down and drew a crumpled paper from his jacket. It was a map, territory locations marked in red X, including Thaddeus's ranch. At the bottom, in scrawled ink, Phase 1 complete. Begin Phase 2 upon confirmation. This wasn't random, Thaddeus said grimly. Valdez is planning to take the whole region. We're just the start. By now, the hoofbeats were deafening. They arrived at the mine as the first riders materialized in the canyon below. The shaft stretched out before them like an open mouth ready to swallow them whole. How deep is it? Evangeline asked. Deep enough, said Thaddeus. Used to be a silver mine, lots of tunnels, just one way in or out. He stood by the entrance, rifle held ready. Below, Valdez rode a white stallion, his silver-trimmed jacket glinting in the sun. Senor Carver, Valdez's voice was like thunder through the canyon. Step outside and we can discuss this as men. There is nothing to discuss, Thaddeus shouted back. You desire my land, I'm not giving it. Ah, Valdez laughed, but it's not the land anymore, my friend. 3 of my men are dead. That blood must be paid. Rather than charging, Valdez's men started piling brushwood and dry wood at the entrance to the mine. They were going to burn them out. You have 1 hour, Valdez shouted. After that, we light the fire and let the smoke do the work. Smoke began curling around the doorway. Evangeline knelt beside Thaddeus, praying in Latin. Then she glanced up. The tunnels. If one opens into another canyon, I can escape. Alert the other ranches. Perhaps raise an army. You certain? I'm little, quick, and if I don't return, you're the one who can fight. Thaddeus nodded. Go. He remained behind, shooting occasionally to maintain the deception that both were still in the mine. Smoke grew thicker. Time dragged. Then, shots. But not from the mine. They rang out of the cliffs, ranchers, dozens, shooting down into the canyon. Valdez's men fled. Thaddeus mounted Thunder and came out of the smoke like a ghost. He charged into the tumult, cutting directly through the fear. Across the canyon, Valdez wheeled, eyes fixed on Thaddeus. You cost me everything, Valdez bellowed, pulling a gleaming pistol. Good. Thaddeus snarled. They clashed. Valdez shot first, missing Thaddeus's ribs by a hair. But Thaddeus's counter shot struck with deadly accuracy, directly in the chest. Valdez staggered in the saddle, blood spilling over his silver coat. "This doesn't end it," he wheezed. "There are others worse than me." "Then they'll have to go through us first," said Thaddeus. Valdez fell from his horse into the dust. Smoke dissipated. Valdez's last men were dead, fleeing, or submitting. Evangeline stepped out from between two boulders, covered in dust, eyes open wide with pride. "The other ranchers," she panted. "They're doing a cooperative, mutual defense. They want you to command it." Thaddeus gazed about at the men and women standing around him, neighbors, strangers, now friends. For the first time in years, he felt something move beyond sorrow. "And you?" She smiled, weary but resplendent. "Someone has to tend to the hurt and teach people that there ain't everything for sale." They rode home together as the sun set below the ridge. The porch had to be rebuilt. The windows were destroyed. But the ranch remained. And for the first time in 5 long years, Thaddeus Carver wouldn't be rebuilding alone. Epilogue. Sister Evangeline opened a mission at Carver Ranch, preaching to the lost and the wounded, and assisting in organizing the Ranchers' Defense League. She never went back to her old mission ways, learning that sometimes God operates through courage and conviction rather than silent prayer. Thaddeus rebuilt better than before. His relationship with Evangeline became legend in the territory, a representation of grit, honor, and redemption. Side by side, they demonstrated that the frontier didn't simply require law, it required justice. And sometimes justice rides into town on horseback, carrying more than a Bible. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe now. And click the next video on screen, because the next story is even more gripping, and it could just flip your conception of right and wrong on its head.